The translator is lying to you. 4 words. That's all it took to detonate a $20 million deal and resurrect a woman the world thought was dead. Mara Keaton hadn't spoken her truth in 3 years, not since the night they destroyed her name, her career, everything she'd built. She'd learned to be invisible, to serve champagne with her head down and her mouth shut. But some instincts don't die, they just wait. Tonight, in a private dining room where power brokers played God with other people's futures, she heard the lie that changed everything. Stay with me until the end. Hit like and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The Jade Room smelled like money. Not the kind you carried in a wallet, the kind that moved in silence, in numbered accounts and handshake agreements worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. The air was heavy with it. Cuban cigars nobody was smoking yet, cologne that cost $300 an ounce, and something else Mara couldn't name but recognized instantly. Tension. The kind that made men sweat through $1,000 shirts. She moved along the perimeter of the room with a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2009, refilling glasses that were still half full, because that's what invisible people did. They anticipated, they hovered, they made sure powerful men never had to ask for anything. 3 years ago, Mara Keaton would have been sitting at this table. Now she was pouring wine for the people who'd taken her seat. The irony wasn't lost on her. It sat in her chest like a stone she'd swallowed and couldn't quite digest. But she'd gotten good at swallowing things. Anger, bitterness, the urge to scream that she didn't belong here, dressed in black slacks and a white button-down with the restaurant's logo stitched over her heart like a brand. She belonged in boardrooms, in negotiation halls where treaties were signed and wars were prevented. She'd brokered deals between governments that hated each other, smoothed over cultural landmines that would have tanked billion-dollar mergers, made impossible people agree on the impossible. And then Lawrence Trent had made sure none of that mattered anymore. But she couldn't think about Lawrence. Not here. Not now. Thinking about Lawrence made her hand shake, and shaking hands spilled wine. And spilled wine got you fired. She couldn't afford to get fired. The Jade Room paid her under the table. No questions asked, no background checks, no paper trail. For someone who legally didn't exist anymore, that was worth its weight in gold. So she poured. She smiled with her eyes, but not her mouth. She made herself smaller than she was. And she listened. Always she listened. Mr. Hahn, I assure you, our projections are conservative. The man speaking was Richard Voss, mid-50s, silver-templed, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. CFO of Meridian Logistics, according to the briefing card the restaurant manager had slipped her before service. Big player. International freight, shipping lanes, port acquisitions. The Shanghai expansion will triple your container capacity within 18 months. Across the table, Victor Hahn said nothing. Mara had been watching him since he arrived. You couldn't not watch Victor Hahn. He was in his early 60s, compact and precise, with steel gray hair cut close to his skull and eyes that tracked everything. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than her car used to, back when she'd owned a car. His hands were clasped in front of him on the table, perfectly still. Everything about him was still. That's how Mara knew he was dangerous. Dangerous men didn't need to move. The world moved around them. Triple capacity, Victor said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Mara had learned to distrust gentle voices. That's an ambitious claim. Ambitious but achievable, Voss said. He gestured to the man on his right, a younger guy with nervous energy bleeding out of every pore. David's team has run the numbers 6 ways to Sunday. The infrastructure's already in place. We're not building from scratch. We're optimizing. David nodded so hard Mara thought his head might come off. The Port of Shanghai is currently operating at 72% capacity. With the new automated systems and the expansion of Berth 12, we can increase throughput by... Excuse me. The voice came from Victor's left, his translator. Mara's gaze shifted. She'd been peripherally aware of him all night. You had to be aware of everyone in a room like this. But now she looked directly. Raymond Zhou, late 40s, unremarkable in every way that mattered. Medium height, medium build, wire-rimmed glasses, black suit that fit fine but didn't make a statement. The kind of man you'd walk past on the street and forget immediately. Except Mara didn't forget people. It was one of the things that had made her exceptional at her old job. She cataloged faces, voices, mannerisms, micro-expressions. Raymond Joe had introduced himself when Victor's party arrived, shaking hands with Voss and his team, translating Victor's Mandarin into flawless English and back again. He was good, technically perfect, accent neutral, the kind of interpreter high-level executives paid premium rates for. But something about him bothered her. She couldn't put her finger on it. A hesitation that lasted a fraction of a second too long. A slight shift in his posture when Voss mentioned the Shanghai port. Nothing concrete, just a feeling. And Mara had learned the hard way that feelings were usually right. Mr. Han would like clarification, Raymond said smoothly. When you say optimize, what specifically are you referring to? Voss blinked. I'm sorry? The term optimize is vague, Raymond continued. Victor's face remained impassive. Mr. Han wants to understand the operational changes you're proposing. Will you be replacing current staff? Renegotiating union contracts? What does optimization look like on the ground? Mara's fingers tightened on the wine bottle. That wasn't what Victor had asked. She'd studied Mandarin years ago, not fluently, but enough to catch the gist of a conversation. Victor's question had been simpler, more direct. Something about timeline. When would the expansion be complete? Raymond had added everything else. Maybe she'd misheard. Her Mandarin was rusty. 3 years of slinging plates and avoiding human contact didn't exactly keep your language skills sharp. She moved to the sideboard, setting down the wine bottle and picking up a water pitcher. Refilled glasses. Watched. We're not looking to gut the workforce, Voss said, a little defensive now. But yes, automation means some positions will be phased out. That's industry standard. It's how you stay competitive. Victor spoke again. Mara caught pieces of it. Something about workers, contracts. Raymond translated. Mr. Han appreciates your honesty. He agrees that competitive markets require difficult decisions. However, he's concerned about the political optics of mass layoffs in Shanghai. His reputation in the region is built on fair labor practices. Mara's pulse kicked up. That wasn't right either. Victor hadn't said anything about mass layoffs. He'd asked about existing contracts, whether they'd be honored. Raymond was adding words, changing meaning. She glanced at Victor, trying to read his face. Nothing. He sat perfectly still, listening to his own translator twist his words into something else entirely. Did he not notice? Or did he trust Raymond so completely that it didn't occur to him to question? Voss leaned forward. Mr. Han, I want to be clear. We're not talking about mass layoffs. We're talking about strategic workforce reallocation. Some positions will transition. We'll offer retraining programs, severance packages for those who don't want to transition. This is a gradual process. Victor nodded slowly, said something short, a question, judging by the inflection. Mr. Han asks what percentage of the current workforce you anticipate transitioning out, Raymond translated. Except Victor's question had been about timeline again. How long would the transition take? Mara set down the water pitcher before she dropped it. This wasn't accidental. Raymond wasn't making mistakes. He was deliberately changing the conversation, steering it away from concrete details and toward vague assurances and political concerns that Victor hadn't raised. Why? David jumped in, fumbling with a tablet. We're projecting about 15% reduction over the first year, but like Richard said, we're offering comprehensive transition support. 15%. Victor's voice cut through the room like a blade. He looked at Raymond, spoke in Mandarin. Mr. Han finds that number acceptable, Raymond said. He'd like to move forward with reviewing the contract terms. Mara's breath caught. No. Victor's tone had been sharp, questioning. She didn't catch every word, but she caught enough. He'd asked if 15% was the final number, or if it could go higher. Raymond had turned a pointed question into bland acceptance. Voss exhaled, relieved. Excellent. David, pull up the contract framework. This was wrong. This was so fundamentally wrong that Mara's entire body was screaming at her to do something, say something. But what could she say? She was a waitress, a nobody. If she opened her mouth, she'd be fired on the spot. And worse, she'd draw attention to herself. Attention was the last thing she could afford. Lawrence Trent's people were still out there, still looking. She'd changed her name, her hair, her entire life. But if someone started digging, started asking questions about the waitress who spoke up in a private meeting, she'd be dead within a week. So she stood against the wall and watched a man get lied to in his own language. David swiped through screens on his tablet, talking fast. The framework is straightforward. Meridian retains operational control. Mr. Han's group provides the capital injection and regional expertise. Profit split is 60-40 in Meridian's favor for the first 3 years. Then it shifts to 50-50 once the expansion is profitable. Victor listened, asked another question. Mr. Han wants to confirm that the 60-40 split applies to gross revenue, not net profit, Raymond translated. Mara closed her eyes, counted to 5, opened them again. Victor had asked about the timeline for the profit shift. When exactly did it move from 60-40 to 50-50? At the 3-year mark, or when the expansion became profitable? Whichever came first. It was a crucial distinction. If the expansion took 4 years to turn profitable, Victor's group would be stuck with the smaller split for an extra year. Raymond had turned that into a completely different question about revenue versus profit, which Voss would obviously answer in a way that sounded good, but didn't address Victor's actual concern. That's correct, Voss said. Gross revenue. We're not playing accounting games here. Transparent partnership. Victor nodded. He looked satisfied. He shouldn't look satisfied. He should look concerned. His translator was sabotaging him. Mara's hands were shaking now. She clasped them behind her back, digging her nails into her palms. The pain helped. Focused her. Think. Think like you used to think. Raymond was professional, experienced. He wouldn't be doing this unless someone was paying him to do it, which meant someone wanted this deal to happen on Meridian's terms, with Victor thinking he'd negotiated hard when really he'd been fed a script. But who and why? The meeting continued. Details about shipping routes, regulatory approvals, environmental assessments. Raymond kept translating, kept steering, kept lying with a smile on his face. Mara kept pouring water. Nobody drank. 45 minutes in, Victor stood. "Excuse me, restroom." The room shifted. Voss and David exchanged glances. Raymond remained seated, checking his phone. Victor walked past Mara without looking at her. That was fine. People like Victor didn't see people like her. She was part of the furniture. But as he passed, she heard him humming, quietly, under his breath. A melody she recognized. It was an old Chinese folk song. Her language tutor had taught it to her years ago, said it was about a farmer who trusted the wrong person and lost his harvest. The lyrics were about betrayal dressed up as friendship. Mara's heart stopped. He knew. Victor knew Raymond was lying, which meant this whole thing was a test, or a trap, or something else entirely that she didn't understand yet. She stood frozen, mind racing. If Victor knew, why was he letting it continue? What was he waiting for? The answer hit her like a fist to the chest. Evidence. Witnesses. He was letting Raymond hang himself in front of Meridian's executives so that when he pulled the plug, no one could claim it was a misunderstanding. Victor Han didn't just want to kill the deal. He wanted to burn whoever had sent Raymond to sabotage it. 5 minutes later, Victor returned, sat down, smiled pleasantly. "Continue," he said in English. Voss cleared his throat. "Right, so pending final due diligence, we're looking at a signing date of..." Victor held up one hand, spoke in Mandarin. Raymond's face went blank for half a second. Then he recovered. "Mr. Han would like to take a short break. 15 minutes. He needs to make a phone call." Bullshit. Mara didn't need to speak fluent Mandarin to know that wasn't what Victor had said. His tone had been too sharp, his words too clipped. "Of course," Voss said. "We'll step out, give you some privacy." "No need," Victor said in English. He looked directly at Raymond. "You stay. Everyone else, please. 15 minutes." Voss and David practically tripped over themselves getting out of the room. Mara moved toward the door with them, but Victor's voice stopped her. "Miss, the waitress." She turned. "Sir?" "Stay. I may need something." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to leave, to get as far away from this situation as possible. But Victor's eyes were locked on hers, and there was something in them that pinned her in place. He knew she'd been listening. Somehow, he knew. The door closed behind Voss and David. The Jade Room suddenly felt much smaller. Raymond sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table. His face showed nothing. Victor stood, walked slowly around the table, trailing his fingers along the polished wood. He looked at the abstract paintings on the walls, the crystal chandelier, the view of the city glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Then he looked at Raymond. "How long have you worked for Meridian?" Victor asked. In English. Raymond blinked. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hahn. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm an independent contractor. I work for you tonight." Victor smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Independent. I see. Tell me, independent contractor, what did I just say before Mr. Voss and his colleague left the room? Raymond's fingers twitched. Barely. You requested a 15-minute break to make a phone call. Did I? Silence. Mara's heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. She should not be here. This was not her fight. She needed to leave, but she couldn't move. I asked you, Victor said softly, why you were lying to me. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Raymond's composure finally cracked, just a little. A tightness around his eyes, a shift in his shoulders. Mr. Hahn, I don't know what you think you heard, but I assure you, every translation has been accurate. The Shanghai port currently operates at 68% capacity, not 72, Victor said. David misspoke. You translated his error correctly, which tells me you knew the real number. You've studied this deal. Raymond said nothing. The profit split shifts at the 3-year mark regardless of profitability, not when the expansion becomes profitable. That term was buried in page 47 of the prospectus. I asked you to clarify that point. You changed my question. Victor moved closer. Raymond leaned back in his chair. The labor question. I asked if existing union contracts would be honored. You turned that into a question about mass layoffs and political optics. Very clever. Made me sound concerned about my reputation rather than about the workers themselves. Easier for Mr. Voss to dismiss. Mara's lungs had forgotten how to work. Victor had caught every single lie. He'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time. I counted, Victor continued, 17 deliberate mistranslations in the past hour. Small changes, nothing dramatic, just enough to steer the conversation away from details I needed and toward assurances that mean nothing. You're very good. I almost didn't notice. He leaned down, hands on the table, bringing himself eye level with Raymond. Who paid you? Raymond's jaw clenched. No one. This is a misunderstanding. The woman, Victor said, gesturing to Mara without looking at her. She noticed too. I saw it in her face. She doesn't speak much Mandarin, I think, but she speaks the language of lies very well. Don't you? Mara's mouth went dry. Sir, it's all right. Victor straightened. I'm not angry with you. I'm simply observant. You moved differently when he started changing my words. Your hands shook. You knew something was wrong. He turned back to Raymond. So, who paid you? Mr. Hahn, I really think... Was it Voss? His board? Or someone else who wants this deal to close on terms that benefit Meridian and leave me holding an asset that will bleed money for 5 years before it's profitable? Raymond stood up. I don't have to sit here and... Sit down. 2 words. Quiet as a whisper. Hard as iron. Raymond sat. Victor pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. A recording started playing. Raymond's voice translating Victor's questions. Then Victor's actual words in Mandarin, time-stamped and matched to each translation. I recorded everything, Victor said. I always do. Trust, as you Americans say, but verify. Raymond's face had gone gray. I will ask one more time, Victor said. Who paid you? The silence stretched. Mara could hear the city outside, cars honking 18 floors below, the muffled sound of music from another part of the restaurant. Finally, Raymond spoke. Trent. The floor dropped out from under Mara's feet. Lawrence Trent? Victor's eyebrows rose. The Lawrence Trent, former CEO of Optica Global? Yes. Interesting. Why would Lawrence Trent care about my shipping deal with Meridian Logistics? Raymond's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him all at once. Because Meridian's being acquired. Trent's putting together a consortium. If you sign this deal on these terms, you're locked in. When the acquisition goes through, Trent controls your contract. He gets your capital, your expertise, your connections in Asia, all at a 60-40 split that keeps you as a minority partner with no operational control. Victor's face remained impassive, but Mara saw his hands tighten on the back of the chair. And if I don't sign? Then Meridian's value drops. The acquisition gets harder. Trent has to renegotiate his terms. So he paid you to make sure I sign. Raymond nodded. How much? 200,000, half up front. Victor walked to the window, looking out at the city. Lawrence Trent. I've never met the man, but I've heard stories. He has a reputation for destroying people who get in his way. Ruthless, thorough. Mara's hands were shaking again. She clasped them together, trying to disappear into the wall. Don't say my name. Please don't say my name. I heard he ruined a negotiator a few years ago, Victor continued, almost conversationally. A woman. She was representing the other side in some merger, and she found irregularities in Trent's paperwork. He couldn't have her exposing his fraud, so he framed her instead. Accused her of accepting bribes, falsifying documents, industrial espionage. Destroyed her completely. She disappeared. He turned around, looked directly at Mara. I wonder what happened to her. Mara couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there while her past rose up and wrapped its hands around her throat. Victor's eyes were kind. It's all right, he said gently. I'm not going to ask your name. I'm not going to ask anything. But if you were that woman, hypothetically, you would know better than anyone what Lawrence Trent is capable of. He looked back at Raymond. You can go. Tell Trent his plan failed. Tell him Victor Hahn doesn't appreciate being manipulated. And tell him if he ever tries something like this again, I won't be polite about it. Raymond stood on shaking legs. Mr. Hahn, Go. Raymond went. The door clicked shut behind him. The room was silent except for Mara's ragged breathing. Victor walked over to her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver stubble on his jaw. He looked tired, but his gaze was steady. You were going to warn me, he said. It wasn't a question. Mara swallowed. I wasn't sure. I thought maybe I was wrong. But you weren't. No. Why didn't you speak up sooner? The question hit her like a slap. Why hadn't she? Because she was scared? Because she was a coward? Because 3 years of hiding had taught her that silence was survival? I didn't think you'd believe me, she said finally. I'm nobody. You're not nobody. Victor's voice was firm. You're someone who saw the truth and wanted to speak it. That's rare. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a business card, handed it to her. I don't know who you are, he said quietly. I don't know what happened to you, but I know you're better than this. He gestured around the room, pouring wine for people who don't see you, hiding. If you ever want to stop hiding, call that number. Mara stared at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, a phone number, nothing else. I can't, she whispered. You can. You just did. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. The woman Trent destroyed, he said. Hypothetically. If she existed, I'd tell her that revenge is patient. It doesn't have to happen today, but when it does happen, it should be thorough. He opened the door. Voss and David were waiting in the hallway, looking nervous. Mr. Hahn, is everything... The deal is off, Victor said pleasantly. I've had some concerns raised about Meridian's long-term stability. I'm going to pass. Voss's face went white. Mr. Hahn, please, if you'll just... Good evening, gentlemen. Victor walked away without looking back. Mara stood in the empty jade room, holding a business card that weighed more than it should. Lawrence Trent. The name she hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years. The man who'd taken everything from her, her career, her reputation, her identity. Who'd made her so afraid that she'd erased herself rather than fight? He was still out there, still playing his games, still destroying people. And he'd just made a mistake. He'd reminded her who she used to be. Mara looked at the business card in her hand, turned it over. On the back, written in neat script, when you're ready. She slipped the card into her pocket and went back to work. But something had shifted. Some door she'd locked 3 years ago had opened a crack, and light was bleeding through. The apartment Mara rented was the kind of place people moved to when they'd given up on being found. Fourth floor walk-up in a building that smelled like old grease and somebody's perpetual cigarette habit. The elevator had been broken for 6 months. The landlord didn't ask questions as long as the cash showed up on the first of every month. She climbed the stairs slowly, her legs burning. It was past midnight. The restaurant had kept her late cleaning up after Victor's aborted meeting. Voss and his team had left in a fury, David practically in tears, and the manager had made her scrub the Jade Room twice because apparently rich people's disappointment left a residue that needed extra bleach. Her hands still smelled like chemicals. She unlocked 3 deadbolts and pushed the door open. The apartment was dark. She didn't turn on the lights, just locked the door behind her, engaged all 3 bolts, and stood there in the darkness until her eyes adjusted. One room, kitchenette along the left wall, bathroom the size of a closet, mattress on the floor in the corner. No furniture except a folding chair and a plastic crate she used as a table. The windows were covered with blackout curtains she'd bought at a dollar store. No internet, no cable, a burner phone that she replaced every 3 months. This was what safety looked like. She dropped her bag on the floor and sat down on the mattress, still wearing her work clothes. The business card was in her pocket. She could feel it there, a rectangle of pressure against her hip. She shouldn't look at it again. She should throw it away, burn it, flush it down the toilet, and forget tonight ever happened. Instead, she pulled it out. The embossing caught what little light filtered through the curtains. She ran her thumb over the raised letters. Victor Hahn didn't need to advertise who he was. The card didn't list a company name or title, just a phone number and those 4 words on the back. When you're ready. Ready for what? To crawl out of her hole and let Lawrence Trent finish what he'd started? To paint a target on her back and wait for the bullet? She'd tried fighting once. It had cost her everything. Mara set the card on the floor and lay back on the mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. It never did anymore, not easily. Her mind was too loud, replaying the meeting over and over. Raymond's smooth lies, Victor's patient trap, the look on his face when he'd said Lawrence Trent's name, the way he'd looked at her, like he knew, like he saw straight through the dyed hair and the cheap clothes and the 3 years of practiced invisibility. She rolled onto her side, pulling her knees to her chest. The position didn't help. Nothing helped. Ever since she'd heard Trent's name spoken aloud again, something had broken loose inside her. A scab picked off a wound that had never properly healed. She could see his face. Lawrence Trent. Late 50s, silver hair, always perfectly styled, custom suits that probably cost more than her current annual salary. He smiled like a shark. All teeth, no warmth. She'd met him exactly twice before he'd destroyed her. The first time was at a conference in Geneva. He'd approached her during a break, complimented her keynote speech on cross-cultural negotiation strategies. They'd talked for maybe 10 minutes. He'd been charming, interested. She'd been flattered that someone of his stature had sought her out. The second time was in a conference room in Singapore, 6 months later. She was representing a Malaysian tech consortium in merger talks with Optica Global. Trent was on the other side of the table. The charm was gone. He'd looked at her like she was an obstacle to be removed. 3 weeks later, her life ended. It started with an anonymous tip to the Securities Commission. Someone claimed she'd accepted bribes from Optica's competitors to sabotage the merger. The accusation was insane. She'd never taken a bribe in her life, and the merger talks had been progressing smoothly. But once the investigation started, evidence appeared. Emails from her account she'd never sent. Wire transfers to offshore accounts she'd never opened. Testimony from people she'd never met claiming she'd approached them with insider information. It was thorough, professional, the kind of frame job that required resources and planning. Her lawyers said they could fight it, prove the emails were fabricated, the transfers forged. But fighting meant discovery, meant depositions, meant her name in the headlines for months while Trent's legal team dragged her through the mud. And even if she won, even if she proved her innocence, the stain would remain. No one would hire her, no one would trust her, so she'd done what Trent knew she'd do. She'd disappeared, changed her name, dyed her blonde hair dark brown, stopped using her degrees, her credentials, her entire professional identity, became a ghost. And for 3 years, it had worked. She'd been safe, small, forgotten. Until tonight, Mara sat up, her heart pounding for no reason she could name. The apartment was too quiet, too still. She grabbed her phone, not the burner, her old smartphone that she kept powered off and hidden in a box under the bathroom sink. She hadn't turned it on in 18 months. She turned it on now. The screen lit up, dead battery warning. She plugged it into the charger and waited while it slowly came back to life. No service. She'd canceled the plan years ago. But it still had her old contacts, her old emails, her old life preserved in digital amber. She scrolled through the contact list. Names of people she used to know, colleagues, friends, mentors. Most of them had stopped trying to reach her after the first 6 months. A few had persisted longer. None of them knew where she was now. She found the name she was looking for. Yuki Tanaka. They'd worked together on a trade negotiation between Japan and Vietnam. Brilliant analyst, funny as hell, loyal to a fault. They'd gotten drunk together in Hanoi after closing the deal and sworn they'd work together again. Then Mara had disappeared, and Yuki had sent her emails for 8 months before finally giving up. The last email was dated 2 years ago. Subject line, "I hope you're okay." Mara opened it. "Mara, I don't know if you're reading these anymore. I don't even know if you're alive. But I need you to know that I never believed what they said about you. Not for 1 second. I know you. You're the most honest person I've ever worked with. Whatever happened, whatever Trent did to you, it wasn't your fault. If you ever want to come back, if you ever need help, call me. Please. I miss you." Mara's eyes burned. She closed the email before she could do something stupid like respond. Yuki was probably fine now, probably moved on. Didn't need a ghost from her past showing up and dragging her into whatever mess Mara was about to make of her life. Because she was going to call that number. She knew it the same way she knew her own name. She was done hiding. The thought terrified her, but beneath the terror was something else, something that felt almost like relief. She turned off the phone and put it back in its box. Lay down again. Closed her eyes. This time sleep came, fitful and full of dreams she wouldn't remember. When she woke up, gray dawn light was leaking through the curtains. Her shift at the restaurant didn't start until 4. She had the whole day to talk herself out of what she was about to do. Instead, she got up, showered, put on jeans and a sweater that didn't smell like kitchen grease, found the business card where she'd left it on the floor. She walked 6 blocks to a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, ordered black coffee she didn't drink, and sat in the back corner with her burner phone. The number on the card wasn't local. International prefix. Hong Kong, maybe, or Singapore. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Last chance to stay invisible. Last chance to be safe. She pressed call. It rang 3 times. Then a woman's voice answered in crisp English. "Mr. Han's office." Mara's throat closed. She forced words out. "He gave me this number." A pause. "Your name?" "He said he wouldn't ask." Another pause. Longer this time. "1 moment." Hold music. Something classical that Mara didn't recognize. She counted her heartbeats. Got to 47 before the music cut off. "This is Victor." His voice was exactly as she remembered. Quiet, precise, patient. "It's the waitress," Mara said. "From last night." "I know. How do you, I've been expecting your call. Earlier than I thought, though. I'm impressed." Mara gripped the phone tighter. "You said to call when I was ready." "Are you?" The question hung in the air between them. Mara looked around the coffee shop, a couple of students with laptops, an old man reading a newspaper, a barista wiping down the espresso machine, normal people living normal lives. She'd wanted that once. Before Trent, before everything. Now, she wasn't sure what she wanted. "I don't know," she said honestly. "That's a good answer." Victor sounded almost amused. "Better than false confidence. Where are you?" "Coffee shop, downtown." "Stay there. Someone will meet you in 20 minutes. "Wait, I didn't—" "Black sedan. License plate ending in 472. The driver's name is Chen. He works for me. You'll be safe." "Safe from what?" "From making decisions on an empty stomach in a public place where anyone could be listening. Come to my office. We'll talk properly." The line went dead. Mara stared at her phone. 20 minutes. A black sedan. She could leave right now. Go back to her apartment, pack the few things that mattered, and disappear again. Become someone new in a different city. But she stayed. 19 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside the coffee shop. License plate ending in 472. The driver got out. Middle-aged Chinese man in a dark suit, and stood by the passenger door, scanning the street with the kind of casual vigilance that said military training. Mara picked up her untouched coffee and walked outside. "Miss Keaton." Chen's voice was polite but firm. She froze. "I didn't tell him my name." "Mr. Han is very thorough. The car, please." Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she got in the car anyway. Chen drove in silence. They headed east into the business district, then into the parking garage of a glass tower that probably had more money flowing through it in a day than Mara had seen in 3 years. Private elevator. Keycard access. 40th floor. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minimalist furniture. A receptionist who smiled like she was paid extra for perfect teeth. "Mr. Han is expecting you," she said. "Second door on the left." Mara walked down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. The second door was open. She knocked anyway. "Come in." Victor's office was smaller than she'd expected. Still expensive, the desk alone could have paid her rent for a year, but not ostentatious. Bookshelves lined one wall. The others were windows. Victor sat behind his desk, reading something on his computer. He looked up when she entered. "Sit." He gestured to a chair across from him. Mara sat. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them in her lap. Victor studied her for a moment. Then he closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. "You didn't sleep well." It wasn't a question. Mara didn't bother denying it. "No, neither did I. I spent most of the night thinking about Lawrence Trent." "That makes two of us." A faint smile. "I imagine you've spent more than one night thinking about him." "Every night for 3 years." Victor nodded slowly. "Raymond confirmed what I suspected. Trent is putting together a consortium to acquire Meridian Logistics. He needed my capital and my regional connections, but he wanted me locked into terms that would give him control. The deal he tried to force through would have been a disaster for me, a windfall for him. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you're walking into." Victor stood and walked to the windows, hands clasped behind his back. "Trent doesn't just destroy people who get in his way. He erases them, makes them examples. You know that better than anyone." Mara's chest tightened. "Yeah. After our meeting last night, I had my people dig into what happened to you. Took them 4 hours to find the truth buried under all the lies Trent spread. Then you know I can't help you. I'm toxic. Anyone associated with me, I know you were the lead negotiator for the KL Tech merger. I know you found irregularities in Optica Global's financial disclosures. I know you reported them to your clients and recommended they walk away from the deal." Victor turned to face her. "And I know that 2 weeks later, you were accused of accepting bribes, forging documents, and selling insider information." Mara looked down at her hands. "The evidence was fabricated. All of it. The emails were spoofed. The wire transfers were routed through accounts that were opened in your name using stolen identity documents. The witnesses were paid." Victor's voice was matter-of-fact. "It was professional work, expensive. The kind of thing that requires serious resources. I couldn't prove it. Because Trent made sure you couldn't. He controlled the narrative from day one. By the time you realized what was happening, it was too late." Victor walked back to his desk, sat down. "You did the smart thing. You disappeared, stayed alive. I ran away. You survived. There's a difference." Mara finally looked up at him. "Why do you care? You don't know me. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when Trent tried to manipulate me." Victor's eyes were hard. "I don't tolerate being lied to, and I don't forget." He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder, set it on the desk between them. "This is everything my team found on Trent's current operations. The Meridian acquisition is just one piece. He's building something bigger, a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and strategic partnerships designed to give him control of shipping lanes across Southeast Asia. It's brilliant, actually. Completely illegal, but brilliant." Mara stared at the folder. didn't touch it. If he succeeds, Victor continued, he'll have leverage over half the imports flowing into Asia-Pacific markets, the kind of leverage governments pay attention to, the kind that makes you untouchable. So stop him. I intend to, but I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands how he thinks, how he operates, someone who's seen him destroy people and knows his patterns. Mara's pulse was racing. You want me to help you take down Lawrence Trent? Yes. I'm a waitress. You're a negotiator, one of the best I've ever seen, according to your former colleagues. You read people, you see patterns. Last night, you spotted Raymond's lies when everyone else in that room missed them. Even me, and I was looking for them. You already knew he was lying. I suspected. You knew. Victor tapped the folder. Trent thinks you're gone. Dead, disappeared, irrelevant. That's your advantage. He won't see you coming. Mara laughed. It came out bitter. You don't understand. Trent didn't just take my career. He took my name, my reputation, my entire identity. Everyone I used to know thinks I'm either a criminal or a coward. I can't just walk back into that world, and I'm not asking you to walk back into that world. I'm offering you a chance to build a new one. Victor opened the folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, slid it across the desk. Mara looked down. It was a bank statement, her name at the top, an account balance with more zeros than she'd seen in years. What is this? Your signing bonus, $50,000, deposited this morning into an account in your legal name, clean money, no strings. Mara's hands were shaking again. I didn't agree to anything. Not yet, but you will. Victor leaned forward. Because you didn't come here for the money. You came here because you're tired of being afraid, tired of hiding, tired of letting Lawrence Trent win. The words hit harder than Mara wanted to admit. She looked at the bank statement, at her name printed there in black and white. Mara Keaton, a name she hadn't used in 3 years. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help me build a case against Trent. Legal, airtight, impossible to fight. I have the resources. You have the insight. Together, we expose what he's been doing, dismantle his network, and make sure he can't hurt anyone else. And when he realizes what we're doing, when he comes after us, Victor smiled, cold and sharp. Let him try. Mara picked up the bank statement. The paper felt real, solid, like something she could hold on to. I need time to think. Take the rest of the day. But Mara? Victor's voice softened slightly. Don't take too long. Trent is moving fast. The Meridian acquisition closes in 6 weeks. After that, his position becomes much harder to attack. Mara stood. Her legs felt unsteady. How do I reach you? You have my number. She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the handle. Why me? She asked without turning around. You could hire anyone, real investigators, lawyers, people who didn't spend 3 years pouring wine and hiding. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then, because you have something they don't. What? A reason to see this through. Mara left without responding. Chen was waiting in the lobby. He drove her back to her neighborhood without a word. When she got out of the car, he handed her a phone. Encrypted, he said. Mr. Han's number is already programmed. Don't use your old phone for anything related to this. Don't discuss this with anyone. If you're being followed, call immediately. Mara took the phone. Am I being followed? Chen's expression didn't change. Not yet. He drove away. Mara stood on the sidewalk holding the encrypted phone and the bank statement and wondered what the hell she'd just done. She went back to her apartment, climbed the 4 flights of stairs, unlocked the 3 deadbolts, sat on the mattress and stared at the wall. The bank statement sat on the floor in front of her. $50,000. She could take it and run, disappear again, properly this time. South America, maybe. Somewhere Trent would never think to look. Instead, she picked up the encrypted phone and scrolled through the contacts. One name, Victor Han. She thought about what he'd said, about being tired of being afraid, about letting Trent win. He was right. She was tired, so tired. Tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of being small, tired of pretending the person she used to be had never existed. But more than that, she was angry. The anger had been there all along, buried under the fear. But now it was surfacing, hot and bright and impossible to ignore. Lawrence Trent had stolen 3 years of her life. He'd made her afraid to use her own name. And last night, she'd watched him try to do the same thing to Victor Hahn. How many others? How many people had Trent destroyed because they were inconvenient? Mara made a decision. She called Victor. He answered on the first ring. That was faster than I expected. I want to see everything you have on Trent, all of it. A pause. Then, when can you start? Tomorrow? Good. Chen will pick you up at 8. Bring anything you need for a few days. You'll be working out of a secure location. Wait, what? If you're doing this, you're doing it properly. That means no more apartment that smells like cigarettes. No more walking home alone at night. Trent has people everywhere. The moment you become a threat, he'll know. Mara's stomach dropped. I didn't agree to... You agreed the moment you called me back. Welcome aboard, Mara. The line went dead. Mara sat in the silence of her apartment, heart hammering, and wondered if she'd just made the best or worst decision of her life. Probably both. Chen arrived at 7:45 the next morning, which meant Victor Hahn didn't believe in giving people time to second-guess themselves. Mara was waiting on the curb with a duffel bag containing everything she owned that mattered. 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, her dead smartphone in its box, the business card, though she didn't need it anymore. She didn't say goodbye to the apartment. It had never been home anyway. The drive took 40 minutes, heading north out of the city into an area Mara didn't recognize. Suburbs gave way to industrial parks, then to something that looked like abandoned warehouse district. Chen pulled up to a gate with a security camera and a keypad, punched in a code. The gate rolled open. The building didn't look like much from the outside. 3 stories, gray concrete, windows covered with grates. Could have been a storage facility or a forgotten office complex. But when Chen led her through the front door, everything changed. The interior had been gutted and rebuilt. Open floor plan, state-of-the-art everything. Computer workstations, wall-mounted monitors, a conference table that could seat 20. Half a dozen people were already working, some on computers, others reviewing documents spread across tables. They looked up when Mara entered, then went back to work without comment. This is the operations center, Chen said. You'll have a workstation on the 2nd floor. Victor's office is 3rd floor, east side. Kitchen and sleeping quarters are west wing, 2nd floor. Don't leave the building without clearing it with security first. Mara looked around, trying to process. How long has this place been here? 6 months. Victor started building it after his first run-in with Trent's people. First run-in? You're not the first person Trent tried to destroy. You're just the first one Victor decided to do something about. Chen gestured toward a staircase. Come on, he's waiting. Victor's office on the 3rd floor was smaller than his downtown headquarters, but somehow more personal. Maps covered one wall. Shipping routes, port locations, trade corridors marked in different colors. Another wall was covered in photographs and documents connected by string, like something out of a crime show. Mara recognized Trent's face in several of the photos. There were others she didn't recognize. Victor sat at his desk, reading. He looked up when she entered. Good. You came. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might try to convince yourself this was a bad idea and run. Victor stood. I'm glad you didn't. Coffee? Please. He poured 2 cups from a pot on the credenza, handed her one. The coffee was good. Better than anything she'd had in years. Before we start, Victor said, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't a short-term project. Taking down someone like Trent requires time, patience, and perfect execution. It could take months, maybe longer. I don't have months. I have 6 weeks before the Meridian deal closes, remember? That's one deal, one piece of his network. I'm talking about dismantling everything he's built. Victor walked to the wall of maps. Trent's been operating in the shadows for years. Shell companies, offshore accounts, strategic partnerships that look legitimate on paper, but exist solely to move money and influence. He's connected to politicians, corporate boards, financial institutions. Going after him means going after all of it. Mara's stomach twisted. That's impossible. It's difficult, not impossible. Victor tapped the map. But you need to know the risks. Trent has resources we can only guess at. He has people everywhere. The moment he realizes someone's investigating him, he'll come after them with everything he has. Like he came after me. Worse, Because this time he'll know it's deliberate. Victor turned to face her. I can offer you protection, security, resources, but I can't guarantee your safety. If you do this, you're putting yourself in his crosshairs again. Mara sipped her coffee. It was hot enough to burn her tongue. Good. The pain helped her focus. Why are you really doing this? She asked. The translator thing was bad, sure, but you walked away. You killed the deal. You won. So why go further? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to his desk and picked up a photograph, handed it to Mara. The photo showed a young woman, mid-20s, laughing at something off camera. She had Victor's eyes. My daughter, Victor said quietly. Lynn. She was a journalist, investigative work, mostly corporate fraud. 3 years ago, she started looking into Optica Global's operations in Southeast Asia. She found evidence of bribery, environmental violations, labor abuses. She was going to publish. Mara's hands went cold. What happened? Car accident. Single vehicle. Drove off a bridge in Malaysia. Victor's voice was flat, controlled. The police ruled it mechanical failure. Brake line rupture. They said it was just bad luck. But you don't believe that. I had the car examined by independent experts. The brake line was cut, professionally. Someone who knew what they were doing. He took the photo back, looked at it for a moment, then set it on his desk. I spent 2 years trying to prove it. Couldn't. Trent covers his tracks too well, but I know it was him. Lynn was getting too close to something he needed hidden. Mara felt sick. I'm sorry. So am I. Victor's jaw tightened. I should have protected her. Should have seen it coming. But I didn't, and she paid the price. Is that why you recognized me? Why you helped me that night at the restaurant? Partly. I saw someone who'd been hurt by the same man who killed my daughter. Someone who was hiding instead of fighting because fighting seemed impossible. He looked at her directly. I thought maybe together we could make it possible. The weight of it settled on Mara's shoulders. This wasn't just about a bad business deal or corporate espionage. This was about a father who'd lost his daughter and couldn't let it go. About a man who'd built an entire operations center just to have a chance at justice. Or revenge. The line was probably pretty thin. You should have told me this yesterday, Mara said. Would you have come if I had? Probably not. The truth was too big, too heavy. Yesterday she'd been thinking about reclaiming her career, maybe clearing her name. Now she was standing in a secret facility helping a grieving father take down a murderer. I need to see everything, she said. Every file you have on Trent, every connection, every deal, every person in his network. If we're doing this, I need the full picture. Victor smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Follow me. He led her to the wall of photographs and documents. Up close, Mara could see the scope of what Victor had assembled. It was staggering. Hundreds of connections mapped out over what must have been years of investigation. This is Trent's network as we understand it, Victor said. The red strings are confirmed connections. Yellow is suspected. Blue is worth investigating, but unconfirmed. There was more red than Mara wanted to see. Trent's web stretched across 3 continents. Shipping companies, tech firms, real estate holdings, investment funds. Names she recognized from her old life. Companies she'd negotiated with. People she'd met at conferences. How much of this is illegal? She asked. Hard to say. Most of it exists in gray areas. Technically legal, but ethically questionable. The trick is finding the pieces that cross the line far enough to prosecute. Mara studied the web, started to see patterns. He compartmentalizes. Each piece of the network is isolated. If one part gets exposed, the others stay protected. Exactly. That's why going after individual deals doesn't work. We need to connect them, show the pattern, prove it's not isolated incidents, but a coordinated system. That'll take, Mara did the math in her head. That'll take years of documentation, financial records, communications, witness testimony, and even then, his lawyers will bury us in motions and delays. Unless we have something they can't fight. Mara turned to look at him. Like what? Victor walked to his desk, pulled out another folder. This one was thicker, bound with rubber bands. 6 months ago, one of Trent's accountants had a crisis of conscience. He'd been helping Trent move money through shell companies for years. Got tired of being complicit. He reached out to my people, offered to cooperate in exchange for protection. Mara's pulse quickened. What did he give you? Ledgers, transaction records, emails, enough to trace money from legitimate sources through various shells and into accounts controlled by Trent. Proof of fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. Where is he now? The accountant? Safe house in New Zealand. New identity. Trent thinks he's dead. Mara opened the folder, scanned the first few pages. Her negotiator's brain started firing, seeing connections, implications. This wasn't just evidence. This was a roadmap. This is good, she said. Really good. But it's not enough. Financial crimes are hard to prosecute. His lawyers will argue the accountant is unreliable, that the records are incomplete or fabricated. We need more. I know. That's where you come in. Mara looked up. Me? You understand how Trent thinks, how he operates. You've seen him destroy someone up close. Victor leaned against his desk. I need you to help me anticipate his next moves. Figure out where he's vulnerable. Find the leverage points. I'm not an investigator. No, you're better. You're someone who reads people, who sees patterns in human behavior. That's more valuable than any investigator. Mara closed the folder. Her hands were shaking slightly. Okay, where do we start? The Meridian acquisition. It's happening in 6 weeks, which means Trent's moving money right now. If we can intercept his financial flows, document how he's funding the purchase, we might find irregularities. He'll be careful. He knows people are watching. But he doesn't know we're watching. He thinks you're gone. He thinks I walked away from the deal and moved on. Victor smiled coldly. That's our advantage. For the next 3 hours, Victor walked Mara through everything they had. The accountant's records, surveillance on Trent's known associates, financial analyses of his shell companies. It was overwhelming, dense, but Mara's brain started to organize it, finding threads she could pull. Around noon, someone knocked on the door. A woman in her 30s, Southeast Asian, carrying a tablet. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but we got a hit on the flag you set. Victor straightened. Show me. The woman tapped her tablet. One of the monitors on the wall lit up with a photograph. A man in his 50s, gray hair, expensive suit. Mara didn't recognize him. Marcus Webb, the woman said, CFO of Meridian Logistics. He just booked a flight to the Cayman Islands, leaving tomorrow morning, returning in 3 days. Victor and Mara exchanged glances. The Caymans, Mara said. Let me guess. Shell Company headquarters? 3 of them, Victor confirmed. All connected to Trent's network. The woman swiped through more screens. Webb's traveling alone. No corporate itinerary filed. He's calling it a personal trip. Personal trips to the Caymans right before a major acquisition, Mara said. That's not suspicious at all. Victor was already moving, pulling up files on his computer. If Webb is handling the money transfer personally, that means Trent doesn't trust electronic transfers. Too traceable. He's using human couriers. Old school, Mara said. Smart, if you're trying to avoid leaving a digital trail. But risky. Human couriers make mistakes, get caught, talk when pressured. Victor looked at the woman with the tablet. Sarah, I need full surveillance on Webb, flight manifests, hotel bookings, everything, and get someone on the ground in the Caymans. I want to know everyone he meets. Sarah nodded and left. Victor turned to Mara. This is an opportunity. If we can document Webb's movements, connect him to Trent's shell companies, we add another piece to the puzzle. It's still just financial crimes. White-collar stuff. Prosecutors might not even care. Not by itself, but combined with everything else, it builds a pattern, shows intent. Victor pulled up a timeline on his computer. The Meridian acquisition is the keystone. If we can prove Trent's using fraudulent funds, the deal collapses. Without Meridian, his shipping network falls apart. Without the shipping network, his leverage disappears. Mara studied the timeline, saw what Victor was seeing. It was elegant, in a way. Take out one piece, watch the rest crumble. What do you need from me? She asked. I need you to analyze Webb's behavior, his patterns, figure out what he's going to do before he does it. I've never met the man. You don't need to. You've met 100 men like him, corporate executives who think they're smarter than everyone else, who take shortcuts because they've never faced consequences. Victor pulled up Webb's profile. Employment history, financial records, social media. Tell me who he is. Mara sat down and started reading. It was strange, using her brain this way again after 3 years of turning it off. But the skills were still there, buried under the rust. She read Webb's emails. Victor's people had hacked his accounts months ago and started to see the shape of him. He's arrogant, she said after 20 minutes. Thinks he's the smartest person in every room, but he's also insecure. Needs validation. See how he name drops in these emails? Had lunch with so-and-so, met with such and such. He's performing, trying to prove he belongs. What does that tell us? That he'll make mistakes. Arrogant people get sloppy because they don't think anyone's watching. And insecure people brag. If he's handling something as important as the Cayman transfer, he'll want credit for it. He'll leave traces. Victor smiled. Good. Keep going. Mara spent the rest of the afternoon building a psychological profile of Marcus Webb. It felt good. Better than good. For the first time in 3 years, she was using her brain for something more complex than remembering drink orders. By the time the sun set, she had a working theory. Webb was going to the Caymans to personally oversee a transfer of funds from Trent's shell companies into Meridian's acquisition account. He'd probably meet with the company's nominal directors, local attorneys who signed paperwork for a fee, and authorize the transfer. Then he'd fly back and act like nothing happened. The question, Mara said, is whether he knows the money is dirty. Does it matter? Victor asked. For prosecution, yeah. If he knows he's laundering Trent's money, that's conspiracy. If he thinks it's legitimate investor funds, that's just negligence. We need him to know. Then we need to prove Trent told him where the money's really coming from. Mara tapped the screen. These emails are too clean. They're careful. We need something less formal. Phone calls, in-person meetings. Something where Webb's guard is down. Victor considered this. Sarah's team can intercept his phone calls once he lands in the Caymans. Foreign soil, fewer legal restrictions, but it's risky. If Webb realizes he's being monitored, he'll shut down. What if we don't intercept? What if we just listen? Same risk. Mara shook her head. Not if he doesn't know we're there. You said you're sending someone to the Caymans. Can they get close to Webb? Physically close? Same hotel, same restaurants? You want to bug him. I want to be where he is when he lets his guard down. Hotel bar, restaurant, wherever he goes to feel safe. Mara could see it taking shape. Arrogant people talk, especially when they're celebrating. If Webb pulls off this transfer, he's going to want to brag about it. Maybe not directly, but he'll slip. Say something incriminating. Victor pulled out his phone, made a call. Sarah, change of plans. I need someone in the Caymans who can blend in at high-end locations. Hotel bars, expensive restaurants. Someone Webb won't notice. He listened for a moment, then looked at Mara. She's asking if you want to go. Mara's stomach dropped. What? You know what to listen for. You can read people better than anyone on my team, and Webb's never seen you before. You'd be invisible to him. I can't. I haven't left the country in 3 years. My passport is expired under your old name, I'm aware. Victor was still holding the phone. I can have a new passport ready in 24 hours. Clean, legal, different name if you want. Mara's heart was racing. Leave the country. Get on a plane. Be somewhere Trent might have people watching, but also be useful. Be herself again. Do something that mattered. If I go, she said slowly, I need guarantees, security, exit plan if something goes wrong. You'll have both. Chen will accompany you, ex-military, trained in executive protection, and I'll have a plane on standby. Anything goes sideways, you're out of there within the hour. Mara looked at the monitor showing Webb's profile, at his smug corporate headshot, at the files detailing his involvement with Trent's network. She thought about Victor's daughter, about the photograph on his desk, about 3 years of hiding while Trent kept destroying people. Okay, she said, I'll go. Victor spoke into the phone. Tell the team we're moving forward. I want full logistics by tonight. He hung up and looked at Mara. You're sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Fair enough. He checked his watch. You should get some rest. Sarah will brief you tomorrow morning on the operation details. For now, let Chen show you to your quarters. Mara stood. Her legs felt unsteady. Victor, thank you for this, for believing I could still do this kind of work. I'm not being altruistic. You're the best tool I have for taking down Trent. He paused. But you're welcome. Chen appeared at the door like he'd been summoned telepathically, led Mara down the hall to the west wing. The sleeping quarters were nicer than her apartment had been. Actual bed, private bathroom, windows with real curtains instead of dollar store blackout fabric. Dinner's at 7 in the main kitchen, Chen said. Code for the door is 4792. Don't share it with anyone. Who would I share it with? Chen's expression didn't change. People trust the wrong people all the time. That's how they get dead. He left. Mara sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday she'd been a waitress. Today she was planning international surveillance on a corporate executive tied to a man who'd already destroyed her once. This was insane. Absolutely insane. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Wondered if she should call someone. But who? Yuki? Hey, remember me, the friend who disappeared 3 years ago? I'm about to fly to the Caymans to spy on a criminal conspiracy. Want to grab coffee when I get back? Her old phone was in her bag. Still powered off. Still full of ghosts. She left it there. At 7, she went downstairs to the kitchen. Found a dozen people eating. Victor's team, apparently. They nodded at her but didn't ask questions. Mara got the sense they were used to new faces appearing and disappearing. She ate in silence. Chicken and rice that tasted like someone's grandmother had cooked it. Reminded her she hadn't had a real meal in longer than she could remember. After dinner, she went back to her room. Tried to sleep. Couldn't. Her brain wouldn't shut up. It kept running scenarios, analyzing risks, planning contingencies, just like it used to. Around midnight, she gave up and went back downstairs. Found the operations center mostly empty. One guy at a computer monitoring something. He barely glanced at her. She walked to the wall of photographs and strings, studied Trent's web in the low light, found her own name in one corner, a photo from her old life, corporate headshot from a conference program, red string connecting her to Optica Global, to Trent. Someone had written in small letters beside her photo, destroyed, location unknown. Mara reached up and touched the word, destroyed. Not anymore. She heard footsteps behind her, turned. Victor stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Apparently not. He handed her one of the cups, stood beside her, looking at the wall. When this is over, Mara said quietly, and we've taken him down, what happens to me? What do you want to happen? I don't know. I've spent 3 years not thinking about the future, just survival, just getting through one more day. And now? Mara sipped her coffee. Now I think maybe I want my life back. Not the old one. That's gone. But something new. Something that's mine. Victor nodded. If we do this right, if we expose Trent completely, your name gets cleared. The charges, the accusations, all of it proven false. You could go back to negotiating, consulting, whatever you want. If we do this right. If. He turned to look at her, but I'm betting we will. Because you're angry enough to be thorough and smart enough to be careful. That's a dangerous combination. For Trent. For everyone. Victor smiled slightly. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He left. Mara stayed a while longer, looking at the web, at her own face staring back at her, at the word destroyed. Soon, she thought, soon that word would belong to someone else. The Cayman Islands looked exactly like the brochures. Turquoise water, white sand, palm trees swaying in the breeze. Mara stepped off the plane into humidity that hit like a wall and wondered how many millions of dollars in dirty money passed through this paradise every day, probably more than she could count. Chen was beside her, carrying both their bags like they weighed nothing. He'd barely spoken during the entire flight. Mara had tried making conversation somewhere over Florida, given up around Cuba. The man had 2 modes, silent alertness and silent alertness while moving. They cleared customs with passports that identified Mara as Jennifer Walsh, financial consultant from Seattle. The customs officer barely looked at her. Rich Americans came through here every day. She was invisible again, just in a different way. A driver met them outside, not local, another one of Victor's people judging by the way Chen nodded at him. They got into a black SUV with tinted windows and air conditioning cold enough to make Mara shiver after the tropical heat. Hotel Meridian, Chen told the driver. Mara's eyebrows went up. We're staying where Webb is staying? Best way to monitor him. You'll be on a different floor, he won't notice. And if he does? Chen finally looked at her. Then I handle it. The way he said it made Mara decide not to ask for details. The Hotel Meridian sat on 7 Mile Beach like a monument to wealth that didn't care about being subtle. Glass and steel and infinity pools. Mara's room was on the 8th floor with an ocean view that probably cost more per night than she used to make in a week as a waitress. The irony wasn't lost on her. Chen took the connecting room. Came through 5 minutes after they'd arrived with a tablet and a small black case. Webb landed an hour ago, he said, pulling up flight information. He's checked into a suite on the 12th floor. He has dinner reservations tonight at the hotel restaurant. 8 o'clock. Alone? Reservation for 2. No name for the second guest. Mara sat on the edge of the bed. So he's meeting someone. One of the shell company directors, probably. They'll discuss the transfer, celebrate, think they're safe. Chen opened the black case. Inside were 2 devices that looked like hearing aids. Audio surveillance. Victor's tech team designed them. Range of about 50 feet. You'll be able to hear conversations clearly even with background noise. What if Webb recognizes the tech? He won't. They look like high-end hearing devices. If anyone asks, you have moderate hearing loss from a childhood illness. There's a medical record in your cover identity to support it. Mara picked up one of the devices. It was lighter than she expected. Victor thinks of everything. Victor's daughter died because he didn't think of everything. Now he overthinks everything. Chen's voice was flat. Put them in. Get used to how they feel. She did. The fit was snug, but not uncomfortable. Chen tapped something on the tablet, and suddenly she could hear everything with unnatural clarity. The air conditioning. Waves outside. Chen's breathing. Too loud, she said, wincing. He adjusted something. The volume normalized. Better? Yeah. Good. Tonight you'll go to the restaurant. Get a table with a view of the room. Order something expensive. Look like you belong. When Webb and his guest arrive, position yourself close enough to hear, but not close enough to draw attention. And you? I'll be at the bar, watching. Mara pulled out the devices and set them on the nightstand. Her hands were shaking slightly. She'd done surveillance work before, listening in on negotiations, reading body language across conference tables. But that was legal, sanctioned. This was different. This was espionage. If they got caught, if Webb figured out what was happening, there'd be consequences Victor's lawyers might not be able to fix. You're nervous, Chen observed. I haven't done this in 3 years. I'm allowed to be nervous. Nervousness makes you careful. Careful keeps you alive. He stood. Rest. Shower. Do whatever you need to do. I'll knock at 7:30. He left through the connecting door. Mara sat in the silence of her hotel room and tried to remember how to be someone other than a waitress who poured wine and kept her head down. Jennifer Walsh, financial consultant, someone who ate at expensive restaurants and didn't flinch at the prices. Someone confident, unremarkable, forgettable. She could do this. She had to. At 7, she showered and changed into clothes Victor's people had provided. Black dress, simple but clearly expensive. Heels that made her 3 inches taller, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 3 years ago, this was who she'd been. Professional, polished, in control. Now it felt like wearing a costume. Chen knocked at 7:30 exactly. He'd changed into a suit that somehow made him look both more approachable and more dangerous. When they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Mara caught their reflection in the mirrored walls. They looked like they belonged here, like this was normal. The restaurant was already half full. Mara gave the hostess her name, reservation for 1, Jennifer Walsh, and was led to a table near the windows. Perfect position. She could see the entire room without being conspicuous. Chen took a seat at the bar with a clear sightline to her table. Mara ordered wine she didn't want and an appetizer she was too nervous to eat. Inserted the surveillance devices while pretending to adjust her earrings. The world sharpened. She could hear conversations from 3 tables away, a couple arguing quietly about whether to buy a condo, a businessman on his phone negotiating something in German. At 8:15, Marcus Webb walked in. He looked exactly like his photos. Gray hair, perfectly styled, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He scanned the room with the casual arrogance of someone used to being the most important person wherever he went. Behind him was a man Mara didn't recognize. 50s, local accent when he greeted the hostess, wearing a suit that was nice but not trying too hard. She made him for a lawyer immediately, probably one of the shell company directors. The kind of man who made a comfortable living signing documents he didn't read for clients who paid in cash. They were seated 2 tables away from Mara. Close enough. She adjusted her position slightly, angling toward them while pretending to look at her phone. The surveillance devices picked up their voices clearly. "Glad you could make time," Webb was saying. "I know you're busy." The other man laughed. "For a client like Mr. Trent, I'm never too busy. Besides, this shouldn't take long. The paperwork's straightforward." Mara's pulse quickened. They were talking about Trent. Already. "How straightforward?" Webb asked. He was trying to sound casual, but Mara could hear the edge in his voice. Nervousness poorly disguised as curiosity. "Standard transfer authorization. You'll sign on behalf of Meridian's acquisition fund. I'll countersign as director of Pacific Holdings Limited. The funds move from the holding account to Meridian's designated account. Clean, simple. Tomorrow morning it'll be done." Webb nodded. The waiter arrived with menus. They ordered drinks, scotch for Webb, rum for the lawyer, and the conversation shifted to pleasantries about the weather and the hotel. Mara ate her appetizer slowly, keeping her eyes on her phone, but her attention locked on their table. This was exactly what Victor needed. Webb and the lawyer openly discussing the transfer, connecting it to Trent. If she could get them to say more, to confirm the source of the funds, or acknowledge the shell company structure. "I have to admit," Webb said after the waiter left, "I was surprised when Lawrence reached out personally. Usually, this kind of thing goes through intermediaries." The lawyer, Mara still didn't have his name, smiled. "Mr. Trent is very hands-on when it matters. This acquisition matters. $20 million in 48 hours. That's not exactly subtle, which is why we're using established channels. Pacific Holdings has been moving legitimate investor funds for years. Nothing about this transaction will raise flags." Webb took a long drink of his scotch. "And if someone looks deeper, if regulators start asking questions, they won't. The funds originated from multiple small investors across 4 countries, all properly documented. By the time the money reaches Meridian, it's clean." The lawyer leaned back. "You worry too much, Marcus. This is what we do. Mr. Trent has been moving money through these channels for a decade. Never a problem." Mara's heart was hammering. They were laying it all out. The shell company, the laundering structure, Trent's direct involvement. This was gold. But Webb wasn't satisfied. "What about the KL Tech situation? I heard that got messy." The lawyer's expression tightened. "That was different. We had someone who got curious, started asking questions, but Mr. Trent handled it." "Handled it how? Does it matter? The problem went away. That's all you need to know." They were talking about her. Mara forced herself to keep breathing normally, to keep her face blank, to not react. Webb shifted uncomfortably. "I just want to make sure we're protected. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. You sign the paperwork tomorrow morning. The transfer processes. Meridian closes the acquisition. In 6 months, you're promoted to a position that pays triple what you're making now, just like Mr. Trent promised." The lawyer's voice dropped. "Unless you're having second thoughts?" No, I'm in. I needed to hear it from you, that everything's secure." "Everything's secure. Mr. Trent doesn't leave loose ends." Their food arrived. The conversation shifted again, this time to safer topics. Mara finished her wine and signaled for the check. She'd gotten what she needed. Staying longer would just increase the risk of Webb noticing her. She paid and left, walking past their table without glancing at them. Chen was already moving from the bar, timing it so he exited 30 seconds after her. They met in the elevator. "Tell me you got that?" Mara said. Chen pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. Webb's voice played back crystal clear. "Usually this kind of thing goes through intermediaries." "Every word," Chen confirmed. Back in Mara's room, Chen immediately called Victor on an encrypted line. Put it on speaker. "We have confirmation," Chen said. Webb and the director discussed the transfer explicitly, connected it to Trent by name, mentioned the KL Tech situation. "Play it," Victor said. Chen played the entire recording. When it finished, there was silence on the other end for a long moment. "This is good," Victor finally said. "Better than I expected. Mara, you did well." "The lawyer mentioned handling loose ends," Mara said. "They were talking about me, about what happened 3 years ago." "I know. We'll add it to the file." Victor's voice was calm, professional, but Mara could hear the satisfaction underneath. "Chen, I need you both out of there first thing tomorrow, before Webb signs the paperwork. If something goes wrong, if he realizes he's being watched." "Understood. We're on the first flight out." "Good. Mara, get some sleep. You've earned it." The line went dead. Mara sat on the edge of the bed, adrenaline still coursing through her system. She'd done it. She'd walked into a room with a man connected to Lawrence Trent and walked out with evidence that could help destroy him. And she hadn't frozen, hadn't panicked, hadn't let 3 years of fear stop her. It felt good, better than good. It felt like being herself again. Chen was watching her. "You're smiling." "Am I?" "First time since I met you." He stood. "Get some rest. We leave at 6. He went back to his room. Mara changed out of the dress and into hotel pajamas, lay in bed staring at the ceiling, too wired to sleep. Her mind kept replaying the conversation. Webb's nervousness. The lawyer's casual mention of making problems go away. Trent doesn't leave loose ends. She'd been a loose end once. He'd tried to tie her off. But she'd survived by disappearing, by becoming someone too small to matter. Now she was coming back. And she was bringing evidence. Sleep finally came around 3 in the morning. She dreamed about conference rooms and signed documents and a man with silver hair who smiled like a shark. At 6, Chen knocked. "Time to go." They checked out quietly. The hotel was mostly asleep, a few early risers in workout clothes heading to the gym, staff preparing for the breakfast rush. No sign of Webb. The airport was quiet too. Their flight didn't leave until 8, but Chen insisted on being early. They went through security, found their gate, waited. Mara bought coffee and tried to relax. It was done. They'd gotten what they needed. In a few hours, they'd be back in the operations center, and Victor's team would analyze the recordings, add them to the mountain of evidence. At 7:30, Chen's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression went hard. "What?" Mara asked. "Webb just checked out of the hotel, 2 hours early." Mara's stomach dropped. "Did he sign the paperwork?" Chen was already calling Victor. Got through immediately. "We have a problem. Webb's moving faster than expected. He might have realized something." Victor's voice came through tinny but clear. "Get on that plane, now. Boarding doesn't start for 20 minutes. I don't care. Get on the plane." Chen grabbed Mara's arm. They headed to the gate. The attendant tried to stop them. Boarding hadn't been called yet. But Chen showed her something on his phone and her expression changed. She let them through. They were the first ones on the plane. Took their seats in business class. Mara's hands were shaking. "What did you show her?" she asked. "Doesn't matter." "Chen, security credentials. Victor has people everywhere. Just sit, don't talk." Other passengers started boarding. Mara watched each face, paranoid that one of them would be Trent's, that someone would recognize her, that this was all about to fall apart. But no one looked at her twice. The plane pushed back from the gate at 8 on schedule, started taxiing. Mara didn't breathe properly until they were in the air. Chen was on his phone, typing rapidly. After a few minutes, he showed her the screen, an update from Victor's team. Webb had met with the lawyer at 6 in the morning instead of the scheduled 9 o'clock meeting, signed the paperwork, authorized the transfer, left immediately for the airport. "He's spooked," Mara said. "Maybe. Or maybe he's just efficient." But Mara didn't think so. Webb had been nervous last night, second-guessing, and this morning he'd moved up his timeline. That wasn't efficiency. That was fear. Had he noticed them? Had the lawyer said something, or was it just paranoia? The flight back felt longer than the flight out. Mara couldn't focus on anything, couldn't read, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except whether they'd just blown the entire operation. They landed around 1 in the afternoon. Chen had a car waiting. They drove straight to the operations center. Victor met them in the lobby. His face gave nothing away. "Tell me everything," he said. They went to his office. Mara recounted the entire evening in detail. What Webb had said, how he'd acted, the lawyer's casual admissions. Chen played the recordings. Victor listened without interrupting. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "The transfer went through this morning," he finally said. $20 million from Pacific Holdings to Meridian's acquisition account, exactly as the lawyer described. "So we didn't spook them?" Mara asked. "Not enough to stop the transfer, but Webb changed his timeline. That concerns me." Victor pulled up Webb's travel information. "He's flying back to New York tonight. Not tomorrow morning like he originally planned. Someone told him to move fast," Chen said, "or he told himself. Either way, we need to assume Trent's network is on alert." Victor looked at Mara. "Which means we accelerate our timeline too." "Accelerate to what?" "The end game. We have enough evidence to move. Not everything I wanted, but enough. Financial records from the accountant, the recordings from the Caymans connecting Webb and the lawyer to Trent. Documentation of the shell company transfers." He pulled up a file on his computer. "I've been working with federal prosecutors, quietly, building the case. They're ready to move when we are." Mara's pulse quickened. "How ready?" "Warrants, subpoenas, the whole thing. But once we trigger it, there's no going back. Trent will know someone's coming for him. He'll activate every defense he has. And if those defenses work, then we lose. He walks. And everyone who helped us, the accountant, you, me, becomes a target." Victor's eyes were hard. "I need to know you're committed. Because once we do this, your life changes again. No more hiding, no more being invisible. You'll be a witness in a federal case against one of the most dangerous men in corporate America." Mara thought about the last 3 years. The apartment that smelled like cigarettes, the restaurant shifts, the constant fear, the way she'd erased herself to stay alive. Then she thought about Victor's daughter, about Raymond Joe twisting words in that conference room, about Webb and his lawyer casually discussing making problems disappear. "I'm committed," she said. Victor nodded. "Then we move. Tonight." He stood and walked to the wall of photographs, pulled down the string connecting Mara's picture to the word destroyed, replaced it with a new card that said, "Witness." "Sarah," he called out. The woman from before appeared in the doorway. "Yeah?" "Activate the prosecution team. Tell them we're ready. And get the accountant on a secure line. I need him prepared to testify." Sarah nodded and disappeared. Victor turned back to Mara. "You should know. When this goes public, your name goes public. Everything Trent said about you 3 years ago gets re-examined. The media will dig up the old accusations. People will take sides." "I know. Some people won't believe you, even with evidence, even with Trent convicted. There will always be people who think you got away with something." "I know," Mara said again. "I don't care anymore. I'm tired of being afraid of what people think." "Good. Because you're about to become very famous. The woman who brought down Lawrence Trent." Victor smiled slightly. "How does that sound?" "Terrifying." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He pulled out his phone. "Chen, I need full security on Mara until this is over. 24/7, no exceptions." Chen nodded. "Already planned for it." The rest of the day blurred. Lawyers arrived at the operations center, federal prosecutors on video calls, strategy sessions that went until midnight. Mara gave statements, signed affidavits, reviewed documents until her eyes burned. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, she found herself alone in the conference room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The wall of evidence loomed in front of her. Trent's web, his empire built on lies and corruption and ruined lives. Tomorrow it would start to unravel. She heard footsteps, turned. Victor stood in the doorway. "You should sleep," he said. "Can't. Too wired." He walked over and stood beside her, looking at the wall. "My daughter would have liked you. She had the same fire, the same refusal to back down." "I'm sorry I never got to meet her." "So am I." Victor was quiet for a moment. "When this is over, when Trent is in a cell where he belongs, I'm going to visit her grave. Tell her we got him, that he didn't win." "He didn't," Mara said softly. "She found the truth. She just didn't get to see it through. But we're doing it for her." Victor nodded, didn't speak for a long time. Then, "Thank you for helping me finish what she started. Thank you for giving me a chance to fight back." They stood in silence, looking at the web of connections that would soon become evidence in a federal case. Mara thought about the waitress she'd been 2 weeks ago, invisible, afraid, small. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who'd looked Lawrence Trent's empire in the eye and decided to tear it down. Tomorrow, the world would know her name again. This time, she was ready. The federal indictment dropped at 9 in the morning, like a bomb with a legal seal on it. Mara watched it happen on the monitors in the operations center. News alerts started pinging across every screen simultaneously. CNN cut to breaking news. Bloomberg's homepage refreshed with a headline that took up half the screen. Lawrence Trent indicted on fraud, money laundering, racketeering charges. Victor stood beside her, arms crossed, face unreadable. But Mara could see his hands. They were shaking slightly. "It's real," she said. "It's real." Sarah came running in from the adjacent room, tablet in hand. FBI executed warrants on Trent's residence, his office, and 3 of the shell company headquarters. They're seizing everything: computers, files, financial records. "What about Trent himself?" Victor asked. "In custody. They arrested him at his home an hour ago. He's being processed now." Mara's legs went weak. She sat down hard in the nearest chair. Lawrence Trent, in custody. The man who'd destroyed her life, who'd killed Victor's daughter, who'd ruined countless others. He was sitting in a cell. It didn't feel real. It felt like something she'd imagined so many times it had become a fantasy. But the news footage was showing federal agents carrying boxes out of Optica Global's headquarters. That wasn't fantasy. That was happening. "Webb," Victor asked. "Also in custody. They picked him up at JFK last night before he could leave the country. He's already asking for a deal." Victor smiled, cold and sharp. "Of course he is. Men like Webb always talk when they're scared." The next few hours were chaos. Reporters started calling. Victor's lawyers fielded them all, issuing careful statements. The federal prosecutors held a press conference. Mara watched it on the monitor, barely breathing as they laid out the case. Financial fraud, money laundering through shell companies, racketeering, conspiracy. The list went on. And then the lead prosecutor said her name. This investigation was made possible by the cooperation of several witnesses, including Mara Keaton, a former international negotiator who was herself targeted by Mr. Trent's organization 3 years ago. Ms. Keaton came forward with crucial information that helped us build this case. The room tilted. Mara gripped the edge of the table. Her name, on national television, connected to the biggest financial crime case in years. She was visible again, completely, undeniably visible. Her phone, the encrypted one Victor had given her, started buzzing. Text messages from Sarah's team monitoring media coverage. News outlets were already digging up the old accusations against Mara. The fraud charges. The bribery allegations. 3-year-old headlines getting new life. "They're going to tear me apart," Mara said quietly. Victor was reading something on his tablet. "Some of them will try, but look at this." He showed her the screen. It was a statement from the Securities Commission, official letterhead, formal language that basically said the previous investigation into Mara Keaton had been based on falsified evidence and was being formally dismissed with prejudice. "They're clearing you," Victor said. "Publicly. The prosecutors made it part of the deal. You testify. They acknowledge you were framed." Mara read the statement 3 times. The words didn't change. All charges dismissed. Evidence proven false. Apologies for any damage to Ms. Keaton's reputation. 3 years of her life, summed up in 4 paragraphs in an apology. It should have felt better than it did. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait. Trent's lawyers will fight, file motions, try to get evidence suppressed. This will take months to go to trial, maybe longer. And me? You lay low, prepare for testimony. The prosecutors will want to depose you formally, and Trent's defense team will try to discredit you. You need to be ready for that." Mara looked at the news coverage still playing on the monitors. Footage of Trent being led out of his house in handcuffs. He looked smaller than she remembered, older. But his face was still set in that same expression of absolute confidence. Like he'd already figured out how to win. That expression made her stomach turn. "He's not going to take this quietly," she said. No, he's not. Victor was right. Within 24 hours, Trent's legal team launched a counteroffensive that was surgical in its precision. They held their own press conference, attacked the prosecution's case as built on unreliable witnesses and circumstantial evidence, named Mara specifically. She watched Trent's lead attorney, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a voice like cut glass, describe Mara as a disgraced negotiator with a history of fraud who was clearly seeking revenge. Ms. Keaton has every reason to lie, the attorney said smoothly. She was investigated for serious crimes 3 years ago. Rather than face those charges, she disappeared. Now she's resurfaced with wild accusations against my client, conveniently timed to a federal investigation. This is not a credible witness. This is a vendetta. Mara turned off the monitor. Couldn't watch anymore. Chen appeared in the doorway. You okay? Not really. Good. Means you're paying attention. He walked over and sat down across from her. Victor wants you to know the prosecutors expected this. It's standard defense strategy. Discredit the witnesses before the trial even starts. It's working. Look at the comments. Mara gestured to her phone, where social media was already turning her into a hashtag. Half the people called her brave. The other half called her a liar. Social media doesn't matter. The jury will. And if the jury believes Trent's lawyers, if they think I'm just some bitter ex-negotiator making things up? Chen leaned back. Then we lose. But we're not going to lose. You have evidence, recordings, documents. The accountant's testimony corroborates yours. Web is flipping. Trent's network is falling apart. He made it sound simple, like evidence and logic would be enough. Mara wished she had his certainty. The days blurred together. Mara stayed at the operations center under security while Victor's team prepared for the legal battle ahead. Depositions, document review, strategy sessions with the prosecutors. It was exhausting. More exhausting than any negotiation she'd ever done because the stakes were personal in a way they'd never been before. 2 weeks after the indictment, Yuki called. Mara almost didn't answer. The number came up unknown, and she'd been dodging reporters and random calls from people she used to know who suddenly wanted to reconnect now that she was famous again. But something made her pick up. Mara? Yuki's voice came through tentative, hopeful. Is it really you? Mara's throat closed up. Yeah, it's me. Oh my God, I saw the news. I couldn't believe it. After all this time, I thought, I didn't know what to think. I'm sorry I disappeared. Don't apologize. I read what Trent did to you, what he tried to do. Yuki's voice cracked. I should have fought harder, should have pushed back when they were investigating you, but I was scared. I thought if I defended you too loudly, they'd come after me too. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you, and I should have said that 3 years ago. A pause. Can I see you? I'm in the city. I can come to wherever you are. Mara looked around the operations center, at the security protocols, at Chen standing by the door like a sentinel. It's complicated. I'm kind of in protective custody. Because of Trent? Because of everything. Yuki was quiet for a moment, then, I'm proud of you for coming forward, for fighting back. You were always the bravest person I knew. Mara's eyes burned. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. That's what brave is, being terrified and doing it anyway. They talked for another 20 minutes. Careful conversation at first, then easier as they fell back into old rhythms. Yuki told her about the consulting firm she'd joined, the project she was working on. Mara told her an edited version of the last 3 years. Waitressing. Hiding. Meeting Victor. When they hung up, Mara felt lighter. Like maybe she hadn't lost everything after all. Some things could be rebuilt. The trial date was set for 4 months out. Plenty of time for both sides to prepare. Plenty of time for Trent's lawyers to dig into every aspect of Mara's life, looking for ammunition. They found some. Old performance reviews from her negotiating days that mentioned she could be stubborn, inflexible. A formal complaint from a client who'd thought she was too aggressive. Nothing damning, but enough to paint a picture of someone difficult. Someone with a grudge. Victor's prosecutors countered with their own evidence. Character witnesses who testified to Mara's integrity. Documentation of her successful negotiations. Expert testimony about how Trent had framed her. It was a chess match played in legal briefs and depositions. Mara tried not to think about it too much. Tried to focus on preparing for her own testimony. But at night, Alone in her room at the operations center, she couldn't stop thinking about Trent, about the look on his face when they'd let him away in handcuffs, that confidence, that certainty that he'd find a way out. 3 months before the trial, Marcus Webb took a plea deal. The news came through on a Friday afternoon. Sarah burst into the conference room where Mara was reviewing documents with Victor's legal team. Webb flipped, full cooperation. He's testifying against Trent in exchange for reduced charges. One of the lawyers let out a low whistle. That's huge. Webb can connect Trent directly to the money laundering, the shell companies, everything. Victor looked at Mara. This changes things. With Webb's testimony, the prosecution's case gets significantly stronger. What does that mean for me? Mara asked. Means you might not have to testify. If Webb gives them enough, they might not need you on the stand. Mara should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt cheated. She'd spent 3 months preparing to face Trent in court, to look him in the eye and tell the world what he'd done. And now they might not need her? I want to testify, she said. The lawyers exchanged glances. Ms. Keaton, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Trent destroyed my life. I deserve to face him. Victor studied her. You sure? His lawyers will come at you hard. Webb's a corporate CFO. He has credibility. You're a disgraced negotiator with a grudge. I know what they'll say. I don't care. I'm testifying. The lead prosecutor, a woman named Amanda Chen, who had no relation to Victor's head of security, nodded slowly. If you're certain, we'll put you on the witness list, but you need to be prepared. Trent's defense team is going to try to destroy you on cross-examination. Let them try. 2 months before trial, Trent's lawyers made an unexpected move. They filed a motion alleging prosecutorial misconduct, claimed the federal investigators had obtained evidence illegally, that Victor Hahn had used corporate espionage to build the case. The motion specifically targeted the recordings from the Cayman Islands. Mara sat in on the emergency strategy session. The prosecutors were worried. If the judge agreed that the recordings were obtained illegally, they'd be thrown out. Without them, the case got weaker. They're reaching, Amanda said. The recordings were made in a public restaurant. No expectation of privacy. But Trent's team is arguing that we used illegal surveillance equipment. The equipment was legal, Victor said calmly. Commercially available hearing devices. Nothing illegal about them. But the intent was surveillance. That's what they're arguing. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Mara wasn't required to attend, but she went anyway. Sat in the gallery with Chen beside her and watched lawyers argue about admissibility and Fourth Amendment rights. Trent was there too. First time Mara had seen him in person since everything started. He sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking calm, confident. He glanced back once, scanning the gallery, and his eyes landed on Mara. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. A knowing smile. Like he'd expected to see her there. Like this was all going according to some plan she couldn't see. Mara's stomach turned. The judge took the motion under advisement, said she'd rule within a week. Walking out of the courthouse, Mara felt Chen's hand on her elbow. Keep moving. Don't look at the cameras. There were reporters everywhere, shouting questions, cameras flashing. Mara kept her head down and let Chen guide her through the crowd to the waiting car. Once they were inside, windows up, Chen said, "You okay?" He smiled at me. "Trent?" "Yeah. Like he knows something we don't." Chen's expression didn't change. "He's posturing, trying to get in your head. Don't let him." But Mara couldn't shake it. That smile, that confidence. The judge ruled against Trent's motion. The recordings were admissible. The trial would proceed as scheduled. Trent's lawyers immediately filed an appeal. It got denied. And then, 6 weeks before trial, everything changed. Mara was in the operations center reviewing her testimony notes when Sarah came running in, face pale. "Turn on the news, now!" Victor grabbed a remote, flipped to CNN. Breaking news. A body had been found in a New Zealand safe house. Male, mid-40s, apparent suicide. Authorities were investigating. Mara's blood went cold. "The accountant." "We don't know that yet," Victor said, but his voice was tight. 20 minutes later, they got confirmation. It was the accountant, Trent's former employee. The man who'd provided the financial records that formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. Dead. Gunshot wound. Preliminary reports said self-inflicted. The prosecutors called an emergency meeting. Mara sat in Victor's office on speakerphone while Amanda explained the situation. We're treating it as suspicious. New Zealand authorities are investigating. But even if we prove it wasn't suicide, even if we can show Trent's people got to him, we've lost a crucial witness. His testimony was supposed to walk the jury through the financial records, explain how the money laundering worked. You still have the records, Victor said. We do, but without the accountant to authenticate them, to testify about where they came from and what they mean, Trent's lawyers will tear them apart. They'll argue the documents are unreliable, possibly fabricated. What about Webb? Mara asked. Webb can testify to the shell company structure, but he doesn't have the granular knowledge the accountant had. We're still in good shape, but this hurts. Badly. After the call ended, Victor sat in silence for a long time. He killed him, Mara said quietly. Trent, he found the accountant and had him killed. Probably, but we can't prove it. And even if we could, it wouldn't matter for this trial. It's a separate crime. So he just gets away with it? For now. Victor's jaw was tight. But not forever. Men like Trent always make mistakes eventually. We just have to be patient. Mara didn't feel patient. She felt angry, sick. The accountant had risked everything to help them, and Trent had reached across the world and silenced him anyway. How were they supposed to fight someone who could do that? The trial started on a Tuesday morning in October. Federal courthouse downtown. Security was intense. Metal detectors. Bag searches. Reporters camped outside. Mara sat in the gallery for the first 3 days, watching jury selection. Trent's lawyers fought over every candidate. The prosecutors did too. It took a week to seat 12 jurors and 4 alternates. Opening statements came next. The prosecution went first. Amanda stood in front of the jury and laid out the case in clear, methodical detail. Financial fraud, money laundering, a criminal enterprise built over years. She showed charts, documents, photos of Trent's shell company offices. Then Trent's lead attorney stood up. She was good, better than good. She painted Trent as a successful businessman, targeted by overzealous prosecutors, building a case on circumstantial evidence and unreliable witnesses. She mentioned the dead accountant, suggested his suicide proved he'd been lying, that the guilt had caught up with him. Mara wanted to throw something. The prosecution's case took 2 weeks. They called FBI agents who'd executed the warrants, forensic accountants who'd analyzed the financial records, corporate officers from companies Trent had worked with, and then they called Marcus Webb. Webb looked terrible, thinner than in the Cayman Islands, circles under his eyes. He took the stand and swore to tell the truth. Amanda walked him through it, how Trent had approached him, how the shell company transfers worked, how Webb had known the money was dirty, but had done it anyway because Trent had promised him a promotion. And when you met with the director of Pacific Holdings in the Cayman Islands, Amanda said, what did you discuss? The transfer, $20 million from Mr. Trent's accounts to Meridian's acquisition fund. Did you know where that money originally came from? Objection calls for speculation. I'll rephrase. Did Mr. Trent tell you where the money came from? Webb nodded. He said it was from various investors, but the way he said it, I knew it wasn't legitimate. I knew it was laundered. And you proceeded with the transfer anyway? Yes. Why? Webb looked down. Because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't. Trent's attorney destroyed him on cross-examination, made him admit he'd taken a plea deal, made him admit he'd committed crimes, made him look like a liar trying to save himself. But the core testimony stood. Webb had connected Trent to the money laundering directly. After Webb, the prosecution called 3 more witnesses. Then they called Mara. She walked to the stand on shaking legs, swore the oath, sat down, looked out at the courtroom. Trent was watching her. Same smile as before. Amanda started with easy questions, her background, her career as a negotiator, how she'd first encountered Trent, then harder questions, the Caltech merger, what she'd found, what had happened after. Mara told the story she'd kept buried for 3 years, the investigation, the false evidence, how Trent had destroyed her reputation and forced her into hiding. Why did you come forward now? Amanda asked. Because I realized hiding wasn't the same as being safe. Trent was still out there,
still destroying people, and I was the only one who could connect what happened to me to the pattern of his behavior. Were you nervous about testifying? Terrified. Why do it then? Mara looked directly at Trent. Because someone has to stop him. Amanda asked a few more questions, then sat down. Trent's attorney stood up, smiled pleasantly. Miss Keaton, you've had a difficult few years, haven't you? Yes. Lost your career, your reputation. Must have been very angry about that. I was. Angry enough to want revenge? Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. The attorney didn't even pause. You disappeared for 3 years. During that time, did you seek therapy? No. Did you speak to anyone about what you were going through? No. So you spent 3 years alone, nursing a grudge against Lawrence Trent. Is that fair to say? Mara's hands tightened on the armrest. I spent 3 years surviving. By your own admission, you were terrified, paranoid, living under a false name. That doesn't sound like someone in a stable mental state. Objection! I'll allow it. Answer the question, Ms. Keaton. Mara took a breath. I was scared, but I wasn't paranoid. Everything I was afraid of was real. Trent had destroyed my career. He'd made it impossible for me to work. He'd forced me into hiding. That's not paranoia. That's reality. A reality you can't prove. The investigation into your conduct 3 years ago found evidence of fraud. Evidence Trent fabricated. So you say, but the Securities Commission closed their investigation without filing charges, correct? Because I cooperated and agreed to stop practicing, or because they didn't have enough evidence to prosecute. It went on like that for 2 hours. The attorney picked at every detail, made Mara repeat herself, tried to catch her in contradictions. Mara held her ground, but it was exhausting. When she finally stepped down, she felt wrung out, hollow. Victor met her outside the courtroom. You did well. Didn't feel like it. Juries understand. They know defense attorneys attack witnesses. What matters is you stayed consistent. You didn't break. The prosecution rested their case the next day. Trent's defense took another week. They called character witnesses, business associates who testified to Trent's integrity, experts who questioned the financial analysis. Then Trent himself took the stand. He was good, calm, confident. He denied everything, said Webb was lying, said the accountant had been embezzling and killed himself when he got caught, said Mara was a disgraced negotiator seeking revenge. The jury listened. Some of them looked convinced. Closing arguments came 3 weeks after the trial started. Both sides summarized their cases. Amanda was methodical. Trent's attorney was passionate. Then the jury went to deliberate. They were out for 4 days. Mara spent those 4 days barely sleeping, pacing the operations center, playing out every possible scenario. Victor tried to keep her distracted. It didn't work. On the 4th day, the call came. The jury had reached a verdict. Everyone rushed to the courthouse. Mara sat in the gallery between Victor and Chen, heart hammering. The jury filed in. Wouldn't look at Trent. That was supposed to be a good sign. The judge asked if they'd reached a verdict. The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of financial fraud, how do you find? Guilty. Mara's vision blurred. She gripped Victor's hand. On the charge of money laundering? Guilty. On the charge of racketeering? Guilty. 8 charges. Guilty on all 8. Trent's face went white. His attorney was already standing, asking for poll of the jury. Each juror confirmed. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel, called for order. Mara couldn't hear any of it. The roaring in her ears drowned everything out. They'd won. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge gave Trent 15 years. With credit for time served and good behavior, he'd be out in 12. It wasn't life, but it was something. After the sentencing, Mara stood on the courthouse steps with Victor. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Amanda Chen stepped up to the microphone. Justice was served today. Lawrence Trent used his position and resources to defraud investors, launder money, and destroy anyone who stood in his way. Thanks to brave witnesses like Mara Keaton and Marcus Webb, he's been held accountable. More questions, more cameras. Victor leaned close to Mara.
You don't have to stay for this.
I know, but I want to. She wanted to see it, wanted to witness Trent being led away, wanted to know it was real.
When they finally made it through the crowd to Victor's car, Mara felt like she could breathe for the first time in 3 years. "What now?" she asked. Victor smiled. "Now you rebuild." 3 months later, Mara sat in a conference room on the 40th floor of a glass tower in the financial district. Different tower, different room, but the view was just as good. Across the table sat representatives from a tech consortium looking to negotiate a merger with a European firm. Complex deal. Cultural sensitivities. Exactly the kind of thing Mara used to handle. Used to. And would again. She'd spent the months after Trent's conviction rebuilding her reputation, doing interviews, writing an op-ed about corporate fraud, taking meetings with old colleagues who'd believed in her and new ones who wanted to work with her now that she was vindicated. Victor had offered her a job, director of strategic negotiations for his company. Good salary, real responsibility, a chance to use her skills for something that mattered. She'd accepted. This was her first deal, and she was nervous, but the good kind of nervous, the kind that meant she cared. The consortium's CEO was talking. Mara listened, heard what he was saying and what he wasn't saying, started to see the shape of the deal, the pressure points, the opportunities. "I think we can make this work," she said when he finished. "But we need to address the intellectual property concerns up front. That's going to be your biggest obstacle." The CEO nodded. "Agreed. What do you suggest?" Mara pulled up a document on her tablet, started outlining a framework. The words came easily, naturally, like she'd never stopped doing this. Because maybe she hadn't. Maybe the negotiator had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to come back. The meeting went well, lasted 3 hours. By the end, they had the outline of a deal that would work for both sides. When everyone left, Mara sat alone in the conference room for a moment, looked out at the city. Her phone buzzed, text from Victor. "How did it go?" She typed back. "Good, really good." "Told you," Mara smiled. Put her phone away. Gathered her things. As she walked out, she passed a mirror in the hallway. Stopped. Looked at herself. The woman looking back wasn't the terrified waitress from 3 years ago. Wasn't the broken negotiator Trent had tried to destroy. She was someone new. Someone who'd been to hell and climbed back out. Someone who'd faced the man who ruined her and won. Mara Keaton. Negotiator. Witness. Survivor. And finally, free. She walked out of the building into the afternoon sun. Chen was waiting by the car, as always. But now it felt less like protection and more like partnership. "Where to?" he asked. Mara thought about it. She had nowhere she had to be. No one she was hiding from. For the first time in years, her time was her own. "Somewhere I can get decent coffee," she said. "And maybe lunch that doesn't come from a hotel kitchen." Chen almost smiled. "I know a place." They drove through the city. Mara watched the streets pass by, saw people living their normal lives, going to work, meeting friends, being themselves. She could do that now, be herself, live without fear. It felt strange, unfamiliar, but good. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Yuki. "Dinner this week? I want to hear about the new job." Mara typed back immediately. "Absolutely. Thursday? Perfect." Another piece clicking back into place. Another part of her old life restored. Not all of it would come back. Some friendships were gone for good. Some professional relationships had been burned beyond repair. And that was okay. She didn't need everything back, just enough to build something new. That night, Mara went back to her apartment. Not the 4th floor walk-up with broken elevator and cigarette smell. A real apartment, 2 bedrooms. Nice building, safe neighborhood. The kind of place she used to live in before Trent. She made dinner, poured herself wine, sat by the window and watched the city light up as the sun went down. Somewhere out there, Lawrence Trent was in a federal prison, eating institutional food, sleeping on a thin mattress, watching his empire crumble from the inside. Mara raised her glass to the window, a silent toast, to Victor's daughter, who'd started the fight, to the accountant, who'd paid the ultimate price, To Webb, who'd found his courage too late but found it anyway. To everyone Trent had tried to destroy and failed. And to herself, for refusing to stay destroyed. She drank. The wine was good, better than anything she'd had in years. In the morning, she'd go back to work, navigate another complex negotiation, use her brain and her skills to help people reach agreements. But tonight, she just sat, breathed, existed, free, visible, whole. The woman who'd served wine in silence was gone. In her place was someone who'd learned that the truth, spoken at the right moment to the right person, could change everything. Mark Heaton had found her voice again, and she wasn't planning to lose it.